people need the opportunity to be good at something. So then you might ask yourself, well, what's the best antidote to the discomfort of life? And you might say, well, it's comfort. And I suppose that's what you act out when you swaddle a baby. But a better antidote is something like adventure to excellence. And that's far better antidote to suffering than the mere absence of suffering. So, not to say that the mere absence of suffering, that's not nothing, you know.
Stepping out of that sedation from comfort's difficult, especially if you've become routinized to it.
Yeah, well, that's the difficulty of maturity. You know, the Freudians said very wisely that the good mother necessarily fails.
What's that mean?
It means she stops providing the comfort that insulates people against the need for adventure.
I heard you say recently that a mother's ability to let her child go out into the world, knowing that they're still vulnerable and that it's now down to them and the world to look after them, that's one of the bravest things that they can do.
It's the female crucifixion. And that's exemplified best in, well, the best portrayal of that I've seen is Michelangelo's Pieta. You know, it's a statue of Mary, and she has Christ's body on her, as an adult, on her lap, and he's broken and destroyed, and, you know, she's displaying that. That's the bravery of a mother, to allow that to happen. But not only that, to facilitate it. So
what about...
Way you go, kid. Way you go. Well, why? It's dangerous out there. It's like, yeah, no kidding. It's more dangerous here if you stay with me. By a lot. So you might lose your body out there in the world, but if you stay here, you lose your soul.
It's like, what do you need? How about some friends? That feel kind of like that. How about an intimate relationship with someone that you can trust, that maybe has a future? That'd be good. How about a career that puts you in a dominance hierarchy somewhere, so at least you've got some possibility of rising, some possibility of stabilizing yourself, and a schedule and a routine, because no one can live without a routine. You just forget that. If you guys don't have a routine, I would recommend, like, you get one going, because you cannot be mentally healthy without a routine. You need to pick a time to get up. Whatever time you want, but pick one and stick to it, because otherwise you dysregulate your circadian rhythms and they regulate your mood. And eat something in the morning. I've had lots of clients who've had anxiety disorders. I had one client who was literally starving. Very smart girl. There was very little that she liked. She kind of tried to subsist on like half a cup of rice a day. She came to me and said, I have no energy. I come home, all I want to do is watch the same movie over and over. What, like, is that weird? And I thought, well, it depends on how hard you work. You know, it's a little weird, but whatever. It's familiar. You're looking for comfort. So I did an analysis of her diet. It's like 3/4 of a cup of rice. It's like, you're starving. Eat something. You know, you'll feel better. So she modified her diet, and all her anxiety went away, and she had some energy. It's like, yeah, you got to eat. So, a schedule, that's a good thing, man. Your brain will thank you for it. It will stabilize your nervous system. With a bit of a plan, that's a good thing. You need a career, you need something productive to do with your time. You need to regulate your use of drugs and alcohol, most particularly alcohol, because that does in a lot of people. You need a family, like the family you have, your parents and all that. It'd be nice if you all got along, you could work on that. That's a good thing to work on. And then, you know, you probably need children at some point. And that's life. That's what life is. And if you're missing, you know, you may have a good reason to not be operating on one of those dimensions. It's not mandatory. But I can tell you that if you're not operating reasonably well on 4, I think I mentioned 6, if you're not operating reasonably well on at least 3 of them, there's no way you're going to be psychologically thriving. And that's more pragmatic in some sense than psychological, right? Human beings have a nature. There's things we need. And if we have them, well, that's good. And if we don't have them, well, then we feel the lack. And so behavioral psychologists concentrate a lot more on that sort of thing. You know, it's practical. It's like strategizing. Make a career plan. Figure out how to negotiate, because that's bloody important. Figure out how to say what you need. Figure out how to tell the truth to people. Figure out how to listen to your partner in particular, because if you listen to them, they will actually tell you what they want, and sometimes you can give it to them and maybe they'll return the favor. And if you practice that for like 15 years, well, then maybe you're constantly giving each other what you want. Well, hooray, that would be good. And then there's two of you under both circumstances, and it's better to have two brains than one, because people think differently because of their temperament mostly. And so the negotiation is where the wisdom arises, and it's part of the transformation, the psychological transformation that's attendant on an intimate relationship, and one of the fundamental purposes of a long-term intimate relationship. There's a classic representation of the feminine in the West, and the classic representation is Mary. And here's one of the representations. It's lovely, and it's derived, at least in part, from the story of Mary and the snake in the Garden of Eden. And so Mary has her foot on a serpent, and she's holding Christ off to the side, like this. Well, that's exactly what mothers have always done. It's a biological portrait of human women, is they hold their infants out of the reach of the terrible serpentine predator. Obviously, that's what we do. Well, that's fine, but adults aren't infants, and neither are children. And if you treat them like they are, you undermine them. You pathologize them. You turn them into old infants. That's an ugly thing. And that's the Freudian nightmare. You know, and this happens in therapy very frequently. I mean, you can be tangled into a terrible relationship with your father. That's often either because he was absent, abusive, or tyrannical, something like that. But the standard pathology with mom is she did everything for you. Well, what's left for you to do? Nothing, including never leaving. Right. And that's the motivation, you know, for the woman who's nothing but protective mother. There's no role outside of nurturant of nurturer of infants. Well, you just keep them infants. They'll never leave. They might kill you one night in your sleep, but they'll never leave. It's so comical watching the feminists, postmodernists in particular, rattle on about the absence of gender reality and act out the archetypal devouring mother at exactly the same time. For them, the world is divided into predators and infants. And the predators are evil and need to be stopped, and the infants need to be cared for. Well, that's what the mother does. But adults are not infants. And all you do is destroy them when you treat them that way, especially when they're adolescents and just starting to develop. You know, there's a rule that I attempted to abide by when I had small children, and the rule was, don't do anything for your children that they can do themselves. And that's annoying, that rule, because it takes you like 15 seconds to dress a 2-year-old, but if you let the 2-year-old dress himself, it's 15 minutes, or 20 minutes, or half an hour. You chase them around the house. But if you let them learn to dress themselves, then you don't have to dress them anymore, and they can do it. And you do that with setting the table, and you do that with everything. It's like, no, it's okay, you do that now. Well, I care for you so much, let me do that for you. It's like, I don't care for you at all when I say that. I don't care for you at all. I'm going to stop doing everything I possibly can for you as rapidly as I possibly can. Say, well, that's great. That's how you work in an old age home. Do not do anything for the inhabitants that they can do themselves, because you rob them of the last vestiges of their independence, right? It's what you do when you're a manager. If you're a good manager, you make yourself superfluous by extending autonomy and independence to the people that you manage so that they can take over the whole job. You don't do that by doing everything for people. And you certainly don't do that by dividing the world archetypally and uncritically into predators, those who have more, and victims, infants, those who have nothing, and acting like all you can ever do is protect them. You don't protect, first of all, you can't protect people. You can only make them strong. That's it. You cannot protect them. You can make them strong, and then they can protect themselves.